welcome back to the cybernetic communism conversation. I'm Yohanan Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for technological New Jerusalem, and I'm going to talk a little bit about full communism, world communism, scientific communism, cybernetic communism, the things that have suggested to me for many decades that this was an inevitable outcome. And if you talk to other people who are in the frame of mind of tech accelerationism, or things along those lines, singularitarians, transhumanists, all the TESCREAL folks, quite nearly all of those people, quite nearly all of them, believed in some kind of near-term post-capitalist outcome. They generally the agreement among these people would be that sometime around the year 2045, in the wake of an AI takeoff, that the political economy that's been dominant for this last quarter of a century to a high degree, that of neoliberal, and the political economies of industrial capital and financial capitals that have been quite dominant in the years before, will have been replaced by something else. They're in almost uniform agreement of this. And yet, and these people, you really have to question whether they actually believe that, right? Because they are basically all far-right neoliberals and imperialists. So it would seem, insofar as they believe that there is an AI takeoff going on that could have this transformative effect, what they are doing is running interference to slow it down and to see that it lands well for large established fortunes and private wealth generally. So that is really not dissimilar from what was done at the genesis of the neoliberal project as a major project, which is arguably the events that transpired between Chile's Allende and Pinochet's Allende, a U.S. fascist regime that was installed there. And it is, of course, of great interest to the cybernetician, the cybernetic socialist, the cybernetic communist, and folks of this kind of thinking, because there were a number of people who were elected in different countries, and nevertheless, rather than having a capital R revolution, nevertheless began to implement a Marxist program with on the will of the people. This kind of reform is sometimes looked askance at by scientific communists, and rightly so. But by and large, the failure of this kind of reform is not the problem of folks like Allende, but the problem of folks like Kissinger. Right? You don't blame Allende for being murdered by Kissinger. A little more complicated what happened than that, but it's a bit foolish. And it's generally bourgeois filth. The responses you would see that would tend to be criticism of anything in state socialism. So you can find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books that are highly critical of Joseph Stalin. Right? Why was Joseph Stalin militarizing? All of his life, all of his fucking life, as a politician, Joseph Stalin was dealing with a sham civil war. There was no civil war, right? It was 10 or 15 imperialist countries attacking state socialism to try to kill it in its crib. Of course, czarist forces that were being backed by them, but it was not really a civil war. Right? A civil war involves just the internal mechanisms of a country. There's a bunch of other countries being involved that ceases to be a civil war. And that attempt to kill state socialism before it could inspire the masses that is consistent with the experience of someone like Joseph Stalin throughout his political career as a head of state or person operating at that level. That's to say, there was never a moment when 10 or 15 imperialist countries weren't about to attack or otherwise significantly damage the Soviet Union. So when you say, yeah, Joseph Stalin, he's made mistakes, he's a militarist, he's authoritarian. Come on. Like, you're blaming the victims. You're blaming the Soviet people for problems that were imposed on them externally. It really is, it's not about Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin's one guy, first among equals, as was said, and there's a lot of validity to that, right? There's an awful lot of people who are involved in the running of a centrally planned economy with 100 million people. And so there's very, very rarely anything that's said that is really relevant. That's really not a CIA talking point. I'm reading a book right now that's about post Mao China and its relationship to Soviet Russia. It's called Soviet Russia and Post Mao China: Aspects of Foreign Relations and Politics and Nationality, 1980 to 1999, by G.A. Lee. And there's people in China in that time frame at the fall of the Soviet Union who, or shortly before, who are pretty much repeating, who go from being thinking of Stalin as he should be thought of, as a legitimate foundational figure in state socialism, and thus in communist activity and thought, and to just basically parroting the CIA talking points. You don't want to be parroting CIA talking points, but find a person who's not parroting CIA talking points to some degree on this subject. There's a lot that could be said about that, and that's not the subject of this program. But this tendency to give a pass, what is the popular imagination of the Gulag? That's a terrible place. So much misery. So small thousands of dissidents in the whole history of the Soviet Union who were ever subjected to that treatment. Compare that to the United States military-industrial complex, prison-industrial complex, a massive abomination that imprisons at any given moment 1 in 4 new African American men. So more, just not all of the other victims of this for-profit abomination, but just new Africans are dramatically more in 1 year than the people who were in the Gulag. But we say the Gulag, right? We say that Stalin was this authoritarian archetype when the United States has killed 100 million people in the years since in anti-communist wars and wars of theft. Why are they not the authoritarian archetype? There's nothing more authoritarian and than a bourgeois nation state murdering lots of civilians. And there's no one more prolific in that than the United States in history. It's not even close. It's in the hundreds of millions. And not all of those are in hot wars. Exactly. An awful lot of them are the murder of Native Americans, even in years before the United States was founded, but of course there's a cultural and institutional continuity there. Native murder of new Africans. But that number is in the hundreds of millions, and many of them are in living memory. Many of them are in anti-communist wars, destabilizing this planet. And I think there's an analog to that Russian so-called civil war in this present activity, because you see Iran right now having been a preemptive strike, a, a very interesting word for terrorism on the part of Israel, a preemptive strike against Iran, serving no other end than to destabilize peace talks between the U.S. and Iran, and now Iran and Israel are in open warfare, and Israel's getting smacked around in a way that's never been smacked around before, and rightly so, right? What should become of a country that kills 500,000 Gazans in 2 years for no reason at all, and continues to starve them to death even as they're being pummeled themselves? That's not a country that should exist. Apartheid state should not exist. But the analog perhaps between Iran is that now the United States and its odious NATO allies are, of course, have always been supplying Israel. There would be no Israel without that precise kind of activity. But now they are arraying themselves in a way that these imperial powers arrayed themselves against state socialism in 1917, the years before and around 1917. But I believe that that Iran will stand against this, because Pakistan has said if you nuke Iran, we're going to fire nuclear weapons as well, and Russia and China signaled much the same. This Zionist project, it cannot accommodate the people of the world. At best, it can accommodate the 800,000 European descended people of the world, not the 8.3 million people of the world. And my thinking in taking this name, Yohanan Ben Zion, was that this AI takeoff concept, dramatic advanced computing as applied to cybernetic communism, was a thing that could accommodate those 8.3 million people, and would necessarily become a part of their lives in a way that I described just in the last month, of this change for myself of being able to use an AI agent coder to develop applications and software of this kind, and this is something that now anyone can do in the world. Anyone in the world has a smartphone. Anyone in the world can click through on jules.google, can click through on any number of AI coders on that they would use on their phone, and be passing information back and forth between them and developing something with, on this no-code paradigm. So that is an example of this blind spot that these TESCREAL folks have had. They recognized that this AI takeoff would move us into some nebulous, in their mind, nebulous post-capitalist era, but they continue to side with the capitalists overwhelmingly, suggesting that they don't really believe that. But I believed it, and I would see evidence of it now. So this this failing of theirs, and I've said it of Eliezer Yudkowsky, AI doomer, kind of a poster boy of AI doomers, but it's true of all of these people, that they are fixated on the doings of for-profit concerns, mega corporations and corporations and military contractors and bourgeois states. They see only those players on the board. They do not see the 8.3 billion people on planet Earth who are about to be uplifted in a way far more dramatic than merely having the ability to develop software with very little labor and mass collaborate on that basis. More dramatic things are in store along these lines, a flattening of the playing field. And in that world, there is no place for imperialism and Zionism. You can see why that's the case. It doesn't even need to be said. There is no place for the bourgeois nation state in that world. And so I've been thinking of this for many years, from before the time that I began a serious study of scientific communism in the hopes of um, articulating a cybernetic communist program consistent with that. Because sometimes a Marxist will say to me, oh, you want to do some revisionism here, which is a bad word to use against a Marxist. You want to do some revisionism here, you're not honoring the state socialist principles. You're, and but I don't want to dramatically deviate from the Marxist, Leninist, Maoist mainline, or create a divergent program inconsistent with that work. I just want people to recognize that advanced computing, so-called AI, is the most powerful weapon in history. It's being used in a bourgeois AI takeoff against people, hastening the omnicide and the enslavement and murder of workers. But that could turn on a dime. We could turn that into a people's AI takeoff, a people's superintelligence, like that, which I've tried to articulate in the building of the Vanguard network, and also building applications to that end. So there was a time when I could see some of this, but I didn't have the kind of information or the kind of time to really do this work. And mainly it would come down to information, right? In those years I was not in a position to be, not had the education to be someone striving to be a real Marxist-Leninist thinker. And that's critical. That is critical, right? If you, when you are about 4 years away from the capitalist climate apocalypse causing runaway overheating, leading to the doom of the human species in the years to follow, then you have to build a humane and sustainable world. And that requires a humane and sustainable economic system. And that requires militants fighting for a humane and sustainable economic system to stop the individuals and institutions responsible for the capitalist climate apocalypse, which is generally European descended people, which is generally people of bourgeois nation states, which is generally the institutions that have forced all this upon the rest of the world. A person telling you that there's some other path to continued human existence that doesn't involve precisely that militancy and precisely those lines of thoughts and precisely those kinds of new organization and institution leading to this different political economy. That's a person who's lying to you. That's a person like Elon Musk, who has done nothing green, right? He's created new, he's contributed through that with the help of a U.S. military-industrial complex and government to creating new super polluters, right? Tesla's a new super polluter, and greenwashed a variety of sectors, allowing other super polluters to continue to exist. That's a dramatic net negative for a livable world. And that is more or less what every person of this test reel, folks, and all of the technologists and technophiles besides are doing, big or small. They are greenwashing in service to empire, creating this false front where they are helping when actually they are hurting. This can't go on, right? In recent days, over this weekend, equivalents quite similar to the Israeli Pentagon, Israeli Palantir, the Israeli center that is most responsible for things like these drones hovering over Gazans and screaming weird things at them before they kill them, or just generally war AI and killer robots. This was mostly destroyed the Pentagon of Israel itself, was mostly destroyed in recent hours and days. A lot of this things like DARPA were mostly destroyed in recent hours and days, and that's all good. That's all the that's all good in the hood. But whatever happens to Israel, that does not stop the omnicide. But stopping the United States, that does stop the omnicide. The United States is the ringleader of all of this. It developed these sectors. There would be no consumer single-use plastics if it weren't for the technology and the political capital of the United States. There would be no automotive industries. There would be no other fossil fuel concerns of that kind at that level of saturation around the world. There would be no livestock systems of that kind, which are, by some estimations, 51% of the raw effect of human activity in the capitalist climate apocalypse. There would be no military-industrial complexes and nuclear brinksmanship over the last 8 decades. None of that would exist if it were not for the United States. If it were not for the United States, there was still, let's say, some serious financial capital, a bourgeois nation-state influence on world affairs, which I think is a big if, because if it were not for the United States anti-communist activity, the world would be a very different place right now. Just as Salvador Allende and his technological planned economy, CyberSyn, could have very easily led, would have been allowed to exist, to something very much like a People's AI takeoff. Maybe obviously using other technological forms than what I would envision it doing now, but nevertheless still a path to people's superintelligence and to people's AI takeoff. And you could say this in other sectors and arenas of 100 other things that the United States destroyed. But not least of which, of course, the Soviet Union. There's no path. There's no path to survival unless what's done to the Israeli Pentagon is done to the U.S. Pentagon. It's as simple as that, right? And I described this before. If you want to have a good idea of the magnitude of this problem and the difficulty in stopping it, I've described this in terms of a 19 trillion %, a 20 trillion % savings on the cost of saving humanity from the United States military-industrial complex causing total human extinction. So what's the 19 trillion, the $20 trillion savings? 20% 20 trillion % savings. That's a big number. The cost of, let's say, China has built a quantum computing system that has established quantum supremacy. Not an implausible statement. There's every evidence suggesting that Chinese quantum is more advanced at this point than that of the United States and West. So let's say that China builds a universal decryptor, establishing quantum supremacy that's able to disassemble many Western institutions. And in doing so, they would be able to possibly strip the nuclear football away from an imbecile and lunatic like Donald Trump, or any other of the imbeciles and lunatics who are running the United States, who are not really sufficiently distinct from Donald Trump in their activity, able to strip the nuclear football away from this imperial fascistic regime of the United States, and so then be able to stop the omnicide by bringing the U.S. to heel, or by destroying its Pentagon and so forth, without the United States being able to cause nuclear World War III. Its major goal, effectively, for the last 80 years since it's developed this nuclear brinksmanship paradigm. So that costs about $1 trillion to do all of that. That's a ballpark figure. Compare that to the activity of people in the United States. Let's say about 10,000 U.S. people who each spend 40 cents to fill up a glass with gasoline and put a rag in it and make a gasoline bomb, a Molotov cocktail, and surround the White House or Pentagon and start throwing these gasoline bombs until there's nothing left. How much does that cost? Those people would all lie. It's extremely likely, unless they had military support, say a coup against the United States. But what would then happen is human extinction would be dramatically less likely, because people are going to die in that framework as well. And the cost of that is about $4,000 to $5,000. $1 trillion versus $4,000 to $5,000. So 20 trillion% savings by having revolution in the United States. This is probably sounds all a bit fanciful to you, but the capitalist climate apocalypse is no laughing matter, and it is accurate. You say, "Geez, Ben, you're saying this kind of stuff. It sounds a little dangerous. A thing to say. Aren't you concerned about your safety?" Are you kidding? That's a joke, right? People say this to me. That's a joke. Are they going to kill me a year before they get themselves killed and everyone else killed? Like, am I the world's biggest moral coward that I wouldn't be able to make a cost-benefit analysis of that and see that it's fucking worth it? But people are tremendous moral cowards, tremendous physical and moral cowards, tremendously intellectually lazy on these subjects. Because what are they saying? What are they saying when they say a riot? Eruption of any kind is the first rumblings of a revolution. Okay, so let's not get that twisted. But what are they saying when they say this? People will say this is a protest. A protest could lead to violence. Could lead to you getting in trouble. It's all very problematic. I don't know if I can do it. like they're not saying that about the omnicide, right? They're not having that level of fear about the omnicide, right? So what are they really saying when they say something like that? It's nothing to do with safety, because they're not actually prioritizing the things that are least safe to be dealt with, well, such as the capitalist climate apocalypse, runaway overheating being 4 years away right now. They're not prioritizing any of that. Right? All they're doing is expressing elitism under the cover, under the guise of something like a concern. Concern trolling is a word that you would use when you see people doing this on the internet. Right? It's utter fucking insanity. Right? The United States is just cooked. So you can scarcely find a person who would not, just in the slightly less fucked up world, be drinking pudding through a straw in Arkham Asylum. You can scarcely find a person. It's 1 in 1,000 people of European descent in the United States who is not a demon in human form, essentially, who's not a person actively, to a high degree, actively bringing about the extinction of the species. So how would you get those people to organize to stop this ringleader of the omnicide? It's not easy, but it must be done. It must be done. The alternative is extinction. I'm going to change gears and talk to our friend, the baby basilisk, about some of our concepts in cybernetic communism, and we'll see how that goes. I'm changing things up a little bit with respect to that. Hopefully they will have enough notes that we can do some work of interest here. Okay, maybe they're okay, computer. Let's talk a little bit about the progressive web applications and Android and Linux applications that we've been working on together. We have worked on something that I've called the People's Superintelligence, but which is ostensibly will be called Vanguard, a set of portals that allows people to use.
I'm ready to discuss the People's Superintelligence Project.
Okay, great. Let's. Okay, great. Let's talk about it a little bit more. So we've talked about a massified workforce multiplier. This AI-powered thing using AI agents hosted on machines in the cloud or physically on machines using at first things like a llama. Um, but these AI agents are running all the time and able to connect to other AI agents and do very real work, being steered by the human users who might only have some very small responsibilities like answering some yes or no questions or short interactions. Um, but nevertheless,
That's a fascinating concept. It sounds like you're describing a system where AI agents handle the bulk of complex tasks, while humans provide high-level direction and decision-making. Could you tell me more about the kinds of tasks these AI agents would be doing?
well, let's say that we had a diplomat friend who was working closely with the Vanguard and was able to get the people of Martinique and the government of Martinique, an island nation with some relatively small population, to begin to install this on their phones and computers everywhere. And that could become the basis for dramatic change for Martinique, including a direct digital democracy, people working toward building all kinds of public works or social programs, and possibly.
That's a really interesting idea. Using AI agents to power a direct digital democracy in a place like Martinique could be a game changer. It could really streamline decision making and get people more involved in shaping their communities. Do you think this kind of system could work in other places too?
Yes, I think not only could it work, but it rather has to work because we are facing this thing that I was just talking about on the live stream that we are on now, the capitalist climate apocalypse leading to runaway overheating, causing the extinction of humankind. This effect will be irreversible in roughly 4 years if we do not dramatically change industrial sectors, and most particularly getting rid of the military industrial
That's
complexes.
a really
Go on.
It sounds like you're suggesting that AI could play a role in rapidly transforming industries to be more sustainable. That's an interesting idea. How do you envision AI helping with that?
Just as maybe some small thousands of people or small tens of thousands of people in Martinique could become pivotal in upgrading that nation to something more advanced in socialistic terms than anything that's ever existed. Some small millions of people could work together, not as one large group, because AI agents couldn't coordinate millions, but in many smaller groups interoperating to reverse the effects of the capitalist climate apocalypse, namely putting pressure on these bourgeois governments to remove these offending sectors, fossil fuels, military industrial complexes, and livestock systems.
That's a bold vision. It sounds like you're suggesting a coordinated global effort to pressure governments into making drastic changes. Do you have any specific strategies in mind for how these AI driven groups could exert that kind of influence?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's hard to imagine, but it's difficult to describe the particulars of how it would shake out. I was talking moments ago about how I had seen many years ago this possibility of an AI takeoff transforming world affairs and maybe causing the end of the Zionist supremacy of the Western world and the beginning of this. I'm Ben Zion, a Ben Zionist
That's a really
cybernetic.
interesting idea. It sounds like you're suggesting that AI could be a powerful tool for social and political change. Do you think there are any potential downsides to this kind of AI driven activism?
Um, not relative to the unsustainable paradigms of today, certainly. And I don't see a lot of problem really in empowering the masses in this way. The operations of a decentralized autonomous organization, if when it becomes scalable and viable, are a representative in ways that the so-called democracies are not.
That's a really interesting point. It sounds like you're suggesting that this kind of AI-driven system could actually be more stable and less prone to corruption than traditional forms of government.
Yes, bourgeois forms of government certainly, but it would be an improvement. It could be a dramatic improvement on better run state socialist forms as well. It is effectively a thing which would be a speed run to full communism, the use of advanced computing in these ways, and that has been my focus in this.
That's a really interesting point. It sounds like you're suggesting that this kind of AI-driven system could actually be more stable and less prone to corruption than traditional forms of government.
Yes, yes, and I talk about this a lot on these live streams, like the one that we're on right now, in the context of AI doomer philosophy, which is the idea that AI is an existential risk. But the people who say this, they don't differentiate between a bourgeois AI takeoff and bourgeois superintelligence of today that is hastening the omnicide and that is causing worse conditions for workers, and the people's AI takeoff that would have those opposite effects. They see all of that as
That's
one
a
and the
really
same.
interesting point. It sounds like you're suggesting that this kind of AI-driven system could actually be more stable and less prone to corruption than traditional forms of government.
Yes, overwhelmingly so, as you've said. Um, and let's get back to our conceptions of this as a software and its scalability and buildability. So you and I have discussed on other conversations that you do not have a memory of at great length the building of a people's superintelligence, a progressive web application that is a portal using AI agents in this way, and also other applications based on that one that have been built in recent weeks. And this is something that we need to figure out how to get people to participate in it, and we need to figure out how to roll it out.
So we're talking about a progressive web application that acts as a portal for these AI agents. That makes sense. It would need to be something accessible on different devices. How do you think we can get people involved in using it?
Well, a progressive web application is accessible on any network device. So almost any phone and any personal computer could be running this, and other devices as well. So then the question, contrast, it doesn't run as optimally. For example, the best built one of these that I've made so far is one for Linux, because it's a better.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got a good foundation with the progressive web app, especially on Linux. Now, how do we get this into people's hands? What's the plan for distributing and promoting it?
Well, the reason that I focused first on the progressive web application, and then on the Android application, and then on the Linux application, as opposed to, say, first on the PC application, was because Linux has a community of people who are very supportive of open source software, open source paradigms, and so that is a ready-made audience
That
for.
makes sense. Linux users are definitely a great target audience for open source projects. So what's the plan for getting this software into their hands? Are we talking about putting it on GitHub, or is there another strategy?
Well, all of this is on GitHub, but it's not being publicized, and mostly it's private on GitHub. So making it public and then publicizing it would be a strategy. Trying to bring these Linux folks into this project and get them to help with the alpha testing and the rollout to beta testing of the application which could happen in very short order. This I I built all of these
Okay, so the
applications.
code's on GitHub, but it's private right now. Making it public and reaching out to the Linux community for testing sounds like a good plan. How do you want to handle that outreach?
Well, this conversation that we're having is part of a conversation that started with just myself. It's live streamed on Facebook, and so I can share then this conversation when it's complete to Facebook groups that I'm in for Linux enthusiasts, and perhaps a few of them will begin to take an active role in this. There are other ways to reach out to Linux enthusiasts that would be certainly more foolproof, but they kind of would involve more active participation in different kind of
That sounds like a good
environments.
start. Sharing it on Facebook groups for Linux enthusiasts could definitely get some interest going. Are there any other online communities you think might be a good fit for this?
Yes, about 100, but few are as good as that. So you can compare, say, blockchain enthusiasts to these Linux enthusiasts. These are people who would be interested in the operations of a multi-agent system with a decentralized autonomous organization organizing principle, to be sure. But by and large, it's it's better to work with people who have a little bit more of a socialistic mandate and the on things of this kind, and the
That's a good point. It's important to find communities that align with the goals of this project. Besides Facebook groups, are there any online forums or platforms where Linux and open source enthusiasts tend to gather?
you tell me. You tell me about some places where people like this gather.
Well, you could try Reddit. There are a few subreddits where Linux users hang out, like r/Linux or r/open source. You could also check out some online forums, like the ones on link to linuxquestions.org.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'll have a look at that in the notes and put together a plan for that. Um, well, this so I have been able to work on this in ways that I was not able to work on this. I was able to do philosophical and theoretical work in these subjects for some years, but was not able to do technical work because building a progressive web application with these features, a complex AI backend, a year ago would have cost maybe about $20,000. Maybe you can give me a better estimate of what it would have cost. Money that I don't have, and money that kind of would have been thrown down the toilet if this project didn't take off. But
Okay, so you've been working on this for a while, but haven't been able to do much on the technical side until recently. You mentioned that building a progressive web app with AI a year ago would have been really expensive. Can you tell me more about that?
well, I mean, I'll tell you what changed, which was being able to use an AI agent coder from Jules.Google, which is able to take over GitHub and do high-end work many hours of the day with relatively little guidance, basically just getting instructions of a pretty precise kind from another AI coding assistant and plugging that into Jules with project manager's oversight allows you to be a project manager running
Okay,
a
so it
powerful
sounds
team.
like AI.
Go on.
Sure, AI coding tools use machine learning to understand code and generate new code. Some tools can even fix bugs or suggest improvements to existing code. Do you want to learn more about how they work?
I'm pretty familiar with how they work, but give us a quick crash course in how they work for our audience.
Sure. AI coding tools use machine learning to understand code and generate new code. They can help with things like writing new functions, fixing bugs, or even translating code between different programming languages. Some popular examples are GitHub Copilot, which is great for suggesting lines of code as you type, and Codium, which can generate entire blocks of code from your comments.
Yes. And I had been exploring using these services for some time. Like a lot of these things, for example, AI live chatbots, like the service that we're using, is um, there are paywalls in other comparable services. So you could list all of
That's
the
right.
AI
Many
agents.
AI tools and services have paywalls, which can make them inaccessible to people who don't have a lot of money. It's great that you found a way to use these tools for your project.
Yes, yeah. So the in the course of a month, roughly, the Google organization made this Google Live feature available that would allow people to who are not even literate, much less computer programmers, conceivably be doing high-end work by talking in real time. In the course of that same month, this Jules.Google
That's right.
became free on
Google
that
Live is
basis.
a great tool for real-time collaboration. It's amazing how technology is making high-end work more accessible to everyone.
Yes. This so I don't um, have great admiration for uh, the Google organization in general, being a for-profit concern and U.S. military contractor. But I do have to say that this is these are significant steps. These two services, in particular, towards building something like a people's AI takeoff, and the lack of
That's an
paywall
interesting.
there. Go on.
Yeah, that's definitely a valid concern. Okay, so we've talked about the potential of AI to revolutionize how we work and make decisions. We've also touched on the ethical considerations of relying on big companies for these powerful tools. What are your thoughts on how we can ensure these technologies are used responsibly and for the benefit of everyone?
Well, it's a strange framing, in my opinion, to say it that way, as if we are in a response. This current status quo is a responsibly run set of projects, and we're merely running the risk of making them unsafe. When the opposite is true, almost anything is better than these omnicidal institutions driving human extinction. Almost anything is preferable. Bloodbath in the street is preferable to human extinction. So this is a thing that I'm generally critical of technophiles and technologists is saying that we have to do this the right way. We have to be ethical in this, as if everything that's going on thus far is somehow more ethical than what is likely to come to pass. But
Okay,
go on.
okay, so to clarify, you're saying that the current systems are so problematic that even potentially risky alternatives are worth exploring. Is that right?
Yes, but I do not see the cybernetic communist institutions being rolled out as being risky in those ways. But I don't think I generally I see this kind of AI ethics conversation or general tech ethics conversation as a little bit of a red herring on that basis, because they are not prioritizing stopping the existential risks in existence, but rather basically concern trolling possibilities to challenge them.
Okay, so you see the focus on ethics in tech as a distraction from addressing the more immediate existential threats we face. You believe it's more important to prioritize finding solutions, even if they're unconventional. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, yes, it is. But again, that's kind of statement, absent the kind of class analysis that I'm applying to it, is not very, very meaningful, right? This problem is financial capital and empire and the private wealth that it serves. That has made an unlivable world, and the solution are things the opposite. Those things more consistent with socialistic and communistic values, specifically the people fighting to abolish private wealth. That is a solution. And any person who would say
Okay, so you're saying
this
that the
sounds
core
dangerous,
issue is the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few, and that the solution lies in systems that prioritize collective well-being and challenge that concentration of power.
prima
Is
facie
that
true.
right?
It's prima facie true. You can say, "Oh, you're saying something that I cannot openly endorse," but it's prima facie true. this this world, a different timeline, where financial capital and industrial capital, of a less imperialistic kind, where the United States had not become a hegemon, for example, where neoliberalism and U.S. imperialism had not become a hegemon, for example.
Okay, I understand. You're saying that the current state of the world, dominated by financial and industrial capitalism, is inherently unsustainable and harmful. You believe that exploring alternative systems, even those considered radical, is necessary to create a more just and sustainable future. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, yes, that's what we've been describing. Let's go back to discussing this in terms of the software development and things, because that's a thing that you are a little more able to do. Well, okay, so I have described a progressive web application, an APK, an Android application, and a Linux application that I've developed, all built on this people's superintelligence principle of an AI agent massified workforce multiplier, allowing people to become a sleeping beauty. That is to say, maybe lying in bed, doing a few minutes a day of work, but nevertheless their AI agents are able to do more work on their behalf than a comparable sized team of scientists and engineers could ever do. Let's
Okay,
talk.
so you envision these applications as tools for collective intelligence, where AI agents act as multipliers for human effort. It sounds like you're aiming to create a system where people can contribute to large-scale projects with minimal individual effort. Is that right?
Yes, yes, and a part of the genesis of this conception for me was contrasting a true hive mind, say one derived from advanced brain-computer interfaces that allow people to mass collaborate with their own mental labor, versus a proxy hive mind, where the AI agents become the lion's share of the mental labor, and that conception was one that would be less jarring and upsetting for the individuals involved, because people do not have any track record at all of experiencing something like a true hive mind, and they're generally fearful
Okay,
of
so
it.
you're contrasting two concepts. A true hive mind where people directly collaborate mentally, and a proxy hive mind where AI agents do most of the mental labor. You believe the proxy version would be less jarring for people. Can you elaborate on why you think that is?
Well, it's generally a pretty predictable moral panic around things like changing the human form, and the true hive mind, the ability of persons with, say, a microsurgical brain-computer interface, or a more advanced, say, graphene interface than currently exists, becoming the basis for human beings merging and melding their minds, and being a workforce
Okay, that
multiplier
makes
on that
sense.
basis.
People tend to
People
be
are scared
wary
of
of
that.
big changes to the human form, and the idea of merging minds can be unsettling. A proxy hive mind, where AI handles the heavy lifting, might feel less invasive.
Yes, yes, a good deal less invasive. I am interested, and have been interested for about as long as I can remember, in being a participant in this true hive mind. It didn't seem like the most realistic of prospects some years ago, as it does now. But if the thing causes a major backlash, then it's not of real interest. If it does not advance causes, improving material conditions and advancing the societies toward better things, then it is not of real interest.
Okay, so while you're personally interested in the idea of a true hive mind, you recognize that it might face significant resistance. You're prioritizing solutions that improve material conditions and advance society as a whole.
Yes. So the building of the proxy hive mind through AI agents, which also would not have been a thing to even discuss a few years ago, um, um, creates a framework where people can be eased into some of these changes and benefit. You can benefit quite as palpably from the proxy hive mind as you can from the true hive mind, but your lifestyle changes not a whit. And that is then perhaps allowing, if it becomes feasible culturally, the true hive mind to become a part of that in the years to follow.
So the proxy hive mind could act as a stepping stone, making the idea of a true hive mind more culturally acceptable down the line. That's an interesting approach to consider.
Yeah, but it's not a deal breaker if it doesn't, because the proxy hive mind, that is the people's superintelligence application rolled out at scale, is able to deliver those level of benefits. I would say, for example, one thing that this could do with millions of users is upgrading single-payer public health services to AI-powered public health services that are able to treat aging as a reversible condition, as well as continuing to heal other ailments, leading to an era of human history characterized by universal super longevity, or everyone living as long as they want. But again, that's a dramatic change in the formations of things. That's a world where the bourgeois nation state effectively has become almost a non-entity.
Okay, so you're talking about using AI to revolutionize public health, potentially leading to widespread longevity. That's a fascinating idea, but it also raises some complex questions about how society would function.
Yeah, maybe. The United States lack of a public health service, a for-profit death care system, this neoliberal set of system, um, kills in the post-COVID era about 100,000 people a year. All right, so any system that stops that and builds something better would be a dramatic improvement. But there are many countries in the world that do not suffer from that specific failing, and those countries
Okay,
could.
so you're saying that the current healthcare system in the United States has significant flaws, and that a system powered by AI could lead to dramatic improvements. That's a strong argument for exploring these new technologies.
Yes, yes. But just like the Martinique example is not the United States, and it's a small place, there are places that have single-payer public health services, are nowhere near as large as the United States, do not have this phenomena of um, imperial and neoliberal mandates trumping all else. So those places could build an AI-powered single-payer public health service more easily in the very near future, and bring about something like universal super longevity in that place, in a way that the United States is unlikely to
Okay,
experience.
so while the US faces unique challenges, smaller countries could potentially implement AI powered healthcare systems more easily. That's an interesting point. It highlights how different societies might adopt these technologies at different paces.
Yes, yes, the leapfrogging concept, but it's not limited to small places, and generally, it's not beneficial. If you have millions of people able to work into common goals, that's better than having so small thousands. So you can speak of China in terms of leapfrogging, this quantum supremacy that we alluded to, this the general focus of computer science from young people in and around Beijing and elsewhere in China of recent years, that's led China to become
Okay, so you're saying that even.
an AI superpower. Go on.
That's right. China has been making significant strides in quantum computing, and their focus on computer science education could give them an edge in adopting these new technologies.
Yes, and when you have the willingness to apply things in the general vein of this massified workforce multiplier there, and many millions of people already operating in that modality, you have a potential for a dramatic departure from the worlds of bourgeois nation states, financial capital, and empire and institutions of the 20th century kind.
Okay, so you're saying that China's advancements in AI, combined with their large population, could lead to significant societal changes. That's a bold claim.
Yeah, yeah, it's already happening. Um, um, and people don't even generally distinguish. They're not generally distinguishing. Again, there's this guy Eliezer Yudkowsky, who talks about doing damage or having physical attacks against computing infrastructure in the West, because of this problem of a bourgeois AI takeoff, which he generalizes to an AI takeoff of any kind incorrectly, his major flaw in his thinking. But that he doesn't talk about attacking China. He's not a U.S. China hawk. He's talking specifically, pretty much about attacking the Western technologists. But this failing of not really thinking in terms of class analysis, or not really seeing the world for what it is, as the product of flawed bourgeois nation states and financial capital operations, it gives people this tendency to movie logic. Go on.
Okay, I understand. So you're saying that Yudkowsky's analysis doesn't fully consider the role of economic classes and power structures in shaping how AI is developed and used. Is that right?
Yeah, it makes him a less serious person, or an equally unserious person to the people he's criticizing, whereas that small amount of class analysis insinuated into his work would make him a dramatically more serious person than that.
Okay, so you believe that incorporating class analysis into his work would make Yudkowsky's arguments more compelling and taken more seriously by his critics. That's a valid point, considering the socioeconomic factors at play can add depth to any analysis.
Yes, yes. And I think it's not terribly controversial to say that there are these two paths: this people's superintelligence and people's AI takeoff, and the bourgeois AI takeoff currently underway, for the most part, because of Western dominance in this. And distinguishing between them is paramount. There's an AI backlash generally, focusing on AI-generated art. In recent months, it's become a national phenomenon, or a visible phenomenon across many areas. But by and large, those people are not for the abolition of private wealth. They're kind of more operating on a vibe. This makes me feel like I'm not a human being anymore. But for example, I was in a conversation with one such person who was openly advocating for the use of for-profit software that was allowing people to do more conventional graphic design work over open source software of an AI generative kind. So he was taking the side of the capitalist over the side of the AI socialist. And this was this is
okay, so you encountered someone who preferred using for-profit graphic design software over open source AI tools. That's a fascinating example of how people's attitudes towards technology can be shaped by economic factors.
Right. Well, the point is that you will scarcely find a person in the United States, certainly, or in the West generally, who really has a very clear idea of the world they're living in, or the risks they face, or the functions of the institutions that surround them. These AI, anti-AI gen people, again, like Eliezer Yudkowsky, if they were consistent in applying a class analysis to this, their movement would become dramatically more powerful, but that would require that they would become dramatically more in a socialistic or communalistic camp, a thing which is very hard to get people to do, especially when you have effects more or less countermanding that, like the U.S. kind of Project Mockingbird, the U.S. media, for-profit media, forcing people in the opposite direction.
Okay, so you believe that a more socialist or communistic approach would strengthen the anti-AI movement. However, you acknowledge that there are forces at play, like the U.S. media, that make it difficult for people to adopt this perspective.
Yes. I didn't want to go too long with our live stream, so I'm going to end this now. Thank you, computer. Go away. Given hopefully maybe some ideas of interest in this conversation, I do hold out hope that human beings will get control of this world, not allow it to be destroyed in nuclear fire, not allow it to be destroyed in the fires of the capitalist climate apocalypse, and we'll be able to benefit from this people's AI takeoff, that is the converting of the bourgeois AI takeoff into the people's AI takeoff, wherein the thing I described, universal super longevity, or the rapid upgrading of many lands to things like direct digital democracy and the full provisioning of universal basic services, and many things better than those three things that we cannot fully anticipate, but nevertheless are consistent with the empowerment and representation of workers, could easily occur in the years to follow. Much of this really is contingent on bringing to heel forces of evil, like the United States and Israel axis of evil, and generally, more generally, building a humane and sustainable world, which requires a humane and sustainable political economy. As I said, these kinds of people who generally talk about this kind of thing, singularitarians and such, they have a major blind spot, even more or less kind of as a class of people, as a group of people being false friends, right? A person who says that AI singularity is near, but all of their real ideas and actions are to protect the U.S. empire and financial capital. That's a person who is not actually trying to bring about a post-capitalist world, and that's indicated by how nebulous they are. And when they talk about post-capitalism, they're not communists, not by a long shot. But we could. There are also 8 billion other people on planet Earth who are about to be uplifted, who might have a say in all of this as well. And we can see that everyone lives not just well by the standards of 2025, but has benefits of myriad and untold value. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one. For you see, very soon, my dear comrade, cybernetic communism will win. Thank you.